You want to hear a story about a dirty, crooked cop? Well, we got one right here, ladies and gentlemen. Homeless man framed by a crooked cop sentenced 25 years. Cop framed a homeless man who got 25 years sentence.
Frames a homeless man, gets him a 25-year sentence. That cop has now been caught. Let me do it this way. Let me put up the homeless man he framed.
Okay, ready?
Now, keep in mind, this is not the first time this cop has engaged in this kind of behavior. A Houston cop has been exposed again for falsifying testimony that sent that man, innocent man, to jail for 25 years. Frederick Jeffrey, a previously unsheltered man, was falsely accused of being part of a drug operation.
Wow.
He was not, had nothing to do with it. Let me show you the cop.
You ready for this?
Who created a web of lies and fabricated evidence in order to get a conviction.
There's a scumbag.
For the homeless man. Gerald Goins, Officer Gerald Goins, disgraced ex-Houston cop, framed Mr. Frederick Jeffrey. Let me give you background. Goins saw Jeffrey as an easy target. He looked at Mr. Jeffrey and said, well, this is a person I can exploit because of perceived status. Jeffrey served nearly 6 years of a 25-year sentence for possessing a controlled substance back in 2018. He was convicted solely based on the testimony of former Houston police officer Gerald Goins. The disgraced officer faces murder and organized crime charges in a years-long scheme involving fake drug buys.
Whoa.
They knew he was dirty years ago.
Yeah.
He had been caught being dirty. They allowed him to remain on the force until he started murdering people and engaging in actual organized crime. What did you expect, Houston PD? Yeah. You allowed him to be a gangster, a criminal, while still getting a paycheck from the public. You knew exactly what kind of caliber of individual he was. You knew he lacked morality. You knew he lacked ethics, but you kind of liked that about him, didn't you? There's more.
There's always more.
Because of the officer's dishonesty, flat out lies, and the faulty evidence, Jeffrey was arrested and convicted in 2018 for possessing 5 grams of methamphetamine. Despite the small amount, the judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison because of his prior convictions. Once again, another failure of the system. These variations of 3 strikes you're out. It's a human being, not baseball. But that variation of 3 strikes and you're out permeates again.
Yep.
So he gets convicted.
California is
not
best
based
known to that. 3 strikes
on
you're out
the actual crime or the charges, but based on history. This is how Goins did it, okay? The officer used a broken phone that he found in a house he busted as evidence to further connect the man to the crime. He said Jeffrey owned it, the unsheltered brother. He owned it. But his mother continued to scoff at his suggestion. Fred was homeless. He couldn't afford a piece of bubble gum, she said. Jeffrey maintained his innocence and advocated for himself by writing letters to the judge in the case. The judge finally responded to the request this year. Goins was actually charged for fabricating stories, specifically in a drug raid that killed 2 people. In 2019, the same cop, Goins, is charged with witness tampering, falsifying records, violating the rights of Rogina Nicholas and Dennis Tuttle, the couple killed in the January 28th.
Here we go. Here we go. Here comes the ties in Houston right here. Remember the Tuttles? The no-knock raid, ladies and gentlemen? Oh, yeah. This all ties the shit up as well. Here we go.
South Houston. Here's what happened during that infamous situation.
Yeah, the no-knock raid.
54 was the officer.
Here we go.
Who obtained the so-called no-knock warrant, which allows the police to enter a building without signaling their arrival or reason for being there. The DA can't...
Keep in mind, too, remember, this was the case that News Now Houston, David Warden, was trying to make a big stink. and calling out the Houston PD as well. And and then the infamous when he was exposing Shell, the oil company up and down in Houston. This was the light that David was bringing about the Houston, about these corrupts, the Tuttle no-knock warrant and shit like that.
Og said Goins made numerous false statements in the affidavit presented to the judge who signed the warrant. Among those were allegedly false claims that a 2-week narcotics operation had just concluded at the home. A confidential informant had bought heroin from the address, and the seller was armed with a handgun. So after the Harding Street raid, KHOU, the CBS station in Houston, examined 109 cases in which Officer Goins had obtained a drug search warrant since 2012. In 96 of those cases, Goins claimed a no-knock warrant was justified because knocking and announcing would be dangerous and futile. The same language he used in seeking no-knock warrants for the Harding Street house. In every one of those cases in which he claimed confidential informants observed guns inside, KHOU reported no weapons were ever recovered. Not one time. Not one time.
Not once. Not one time.
Every time he applied for a warrant, because the judges don't get off on this either, because people talk inside of the local criminal justice system. He applied for these warrants, damn near 100 of them, and they never yielded a weapon.
Never.
And y'all kept signing those damn warrants from this cop every time until he killed somebody or his actions led to the death of 2 people. There are additional accusations against this guy. He lies. He's been involved in corruption for many, many years. Let's put up the DA who's finally taking him down. This is the Harris County District Attorney.
Here we are.
Miss Kim Ah.
Ms. Kim Ah.
DA Og said Frederick Jeffrey's case is a due process disaster. In the wake of Harding Street, it is clear that Gerald Goins and other members of the Houston PD Narcotics Division engaged in a years-long scheme involving fictional drug buys, perjured warrants, and phony overtime. Individuals like Frederick Jeffrey were collateral damage. There are more victims, and there's also a network of cops that were down with it. The DA may not have the evidence to get to them, but she knows they are there. All right, Adrian, thoughts on this?
You know, this DA for stepping up and doing this is very courageous. Unfortunately, I don't think that she's going to be able to do everything that could and needs to be done in this situation because there are going to be limits. They use this individual, this particularly corrupt officer, to do all of their dirty work, but there is just a web of individuals involved in this because it does take a village to continue to effectuate these schemes. And you know that there are members of the judiciary who probably are in on it to some extent. Yeah. The problem is corruption is so embedded within our system. And of course, it's the most marginalized who end up suffering to the most significant degree. And I will push and push and push, but we need to have penalties for law enforcement officers who test a lie and who engage in all this corruption that are at a heightened level. If I can face a greater penalty and punishment for attacking an officer, then the officer should also be facing a heightened punishment for failing in their duties and completely engaging in this dereliction that is just absolute an abuse and exploitation of the law in their position of power.
Yeah, we know. Yeah, Gerald Goins. So we now know the face of that cop that did the no-knock warrant that got the Tuttles killed, an innocent family. And at the time, the Newstown Houston was trying to exploit the dirty cops in Houston, the police department. Oh, there is an update on this story before we get out of here. The guy we're talking about, Frederick Jeffrey, he served 6 years in prison. He is now free. A Texas man now free after spending almost 6 years behind bars based on the untruthful testimony of a crooked cop. The then respected officer lied about when he said the homeless man owned a cell phone connected to important drug buzz, assertion that led to the man being convicted on drug charges and sentenced to almost 3 decades in prison. On Friday, July 22nd, Frederick Jeffrey walked out of prison as a free man after the previous day an investigator determined disgraced ex-Houston police officer Gerald Goins fabricated a story that placed Jeffrey, then a homeless black man with a lengthy drug addiction history, in the middle of a case he was working on. KHOU 11 reports. With that said, I'm out of here. Mike Joe, peace out. Much love and respect and prayers.